I'm going to begin in Australia. We begin most of our events with an acknowledgement of country. What I'd like you to do, there's a link in the chat. I'm just putting a link now in the chat. Can you click on that link, which will take you to a Padlet page, and then just click the plus at the bottom, and then just list where you are, and it will present. You'll see I've put Melbourne in there. Well, I've got Melbourne in mine. We can start to see where people are. So there are a number of people in the UK, Malaysia, Austria, in Iran. Iran? Is that Iran? And we'll have the next slide then, please, once you've shared the slides. Well, I was having some trouble in sharing the slides from down here in Melbourne. So this is an acknowledgement of country. I am here with you today from the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, which is the local Indigenous peoples of this country. And for this exercise, I'd like you to just close your eyes for a moment and think about where you're located, the place you are located. And I want you to really go to some area in that place that you know well and that you enjoy, and look around you and get a feel for what is it that you're seeing and feeling. What is the nature of your country? Is it a country where the 4 seasons change dramatically, like in Scotland? Or is it a country where seasonal changes look very different, like Malaysia or the Middle East? What is the culture that has evolved from that country over the millennia that people have lived in that country? And what is the knowledge? How is knowledge shaped in that country? How is language determined? What sort of script do you have? Do you have oral knowledge? Do you have written text? Do you read from left to right in the country where you are, or right to left, or up to down, or down to up? And think about some of the changes that have occurred in the country where you are in your lifetime. Now go into one of your classrooms and just see the students that are there. Where are they from? What do you imagine their future holds? What would you like to impart to them? What do you think are some of the important things that you have to teach your students to make them citizens of the future world? And what knowledges, if you think about your university, Heriot-Watt, what are the knowledges that are quite unique and distinct to place? So just feel into some of that. And as we proceed, just hold some of those answers in your heart. So one of the things I think that I'm wanting to reflect on in this presentation is, what does it mean, or have all of you reflect on, what does it mean to belong at a transnational university? And what must we relinquish to let students and staff feel that they belong? Do your students, are they local, or do they come from many parts of the world? and what might a matter of heart look like in today's classroom? And I'll share a little more about the conference in a moment. So I want to share a little about myself and what's framed my thinking around this topic. In many years ago, I started off with a science degree, and my PhD is actually in microbiology. And I got a position to work on a World Bank project in Thailand. And whereas, although I have struggled with cultural differences from when I was a child, I came to Australia as a refugee. And when I was young, there was a lot of difficulty with whether you were English or not English. And I think that coloured a lot of my interest in cultural differences. But in Thailand, when I was working in Thailand, this was over an 8-year period, I had a real opportunity to think about culture in a more conscious way and to start looking at some of the frameworks through which people understand cultural differences. And while I was working in Thailand, I was coming backwards and forwards between Melbourne and Thailand. And I really felt like I was living two separate lives that for a long time didn't seem to be able to connect. I was two different people. Then while I was at Monash, Monash at that time had just started internationalising the curriculum and had got a campus in Malaysia and another campus in South Africa. And what was happening at that time is that all the content was being produced in Melbourne and then exported to the campuses in South Africa and Malaysia. And people were finding that there was a lot of difficulty with that. And we didn't understand what the difficulty was about because, of course, we were coming to it from a very Western scientific paradigm about this is what truth is, and it could be adapted anywhere in the world and look the same. So I got a project going called Global Knowledge, Local Learning, where we started to, we brought people together from a conference, and it wasn't just South Africa and Malaysia, but from many countries around the world to start thinking and unpacking what do we mean by cultural differences? What do we mean by internationalizing the curriculum? And they're big questions. I also spent some time working at a university in the very north of Sweden, which gave me a whole new understanding of the impact of place. So this was in winter that I was there, and it's a small campus. And in winter, to go from one building to another building, you have to go underground because it's so cold above ground. And all of the different rituals associated with learning and an academic life were completely different and shaped by the country. I was also privileged to spend some time in an international group who were looking at how do we engage Indigenous perspectives in a new university in the Amazon, Ikiam. And they were interested very much in how do they bring Indigenous local knowledge into the curriculum. And then about 10 years ago, I became involved with Indigenous communities around Australia to develop project-based learning that was community-led projects, and we take students on country. So there's a whole paradigm of on-country learning and integrating Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal cultural perspectives, which are very different from any of the other cultural perspectives that I had experience with. So that's just a little bit of a tech background of my engagement with cultural knowledge. And then some 10 years, when I started doing the Indigenous work, I also started training as a analytical psychologist, which gave me a deeper understanding about the psychology behind belonging, behind learning, behind culture. So one of the readings when I was working in Thailand, a book that had come out that really influenced and impacted the way I thought about things was Richard Nesbitt's book, The Geography of Thought. And he highlights, he's done many, many years of research since then about how culture shapes the way we see the world and understand the world and relate to the world. And even the impact, for example, of language. What's stayed with me very strongly from his work is English is a noun-based language. So when people who speak English look at a picture, for example, and you ask them to describe what's there, they will start to name the objects in the picture. So they might say house, tree, gate, fence, car. When you ask somebody from a collectivist culture where the language is verb-based, not noun-based, what they see when they look at that image is the relationship between the objects. So you're actually literally looking at two very different things. So our culture, and there's a whole lot of background I could bring in here. We can discuss at some point after this if you're interested. But the culture impacts our philosophy, what we see as right and wrong and what our moral codes are, what our worldview is and what our attitudes are. It also impacts our epistemology, or how knowledge is created, our ontology, or how we be in the world and what the reality is of grounding that knowledge in reality, and our axiology, or our value system. And place is equally important because place shapes cultural worldviews. We can have a long conversation about this also. And all the knowledge that we are teaching people is adapted to the ecological and social conditions of place. It has a huge impact. And place anchors knowledge in lived and ethical relationship with the world. It's not disembodied. It's related to where people live, with whom they live, and how they live. So I want you to take a look at this little diagram here. The hexagram in the middle, do you see it as concave or convex? Is it sticking up or is it sinking down in the image? And just type your answer in the chat. Now, this is just one example. People who write in English, because English is read from left to right, usually see the hexagram in the middle as convex, it's sinking in. People who read from right to left, as in, say, the Arabic languages, tend to see the shape in the middle as sticking up and out of that. This is just one small example, and there are many others. Yeah, but we can spend a long time. This is just to give you some idea around what we actually see is shaped by many aspects of our culture, language being one of them. So one of the things that became clear to me when we started doing the Global Knowledge Local Learning project was this notion that we could just transmit knowledge. We could package knowledge up in some way and ship it off somewhere, and people would be able to relate to it the same way we did. But we don't change the world by transmitting knowledge, nor do we engage the world. We change it by transforming how we come into relationship with that knowledge and into relationship with each other and the places we inhabit. And there's a lot in the literature at the moment about decolonial pedagogy. So what are ways of teaching and learning that are different from the traditional colonial English way framing of education? There's a lot more relational accountability, and curriculum is now experienced as a living conversation and not a fixed exportable product. And that's really, really important. One of the questions that I want you to just that I want to leave you with to have a think about is, in your experience where you are, what does it mean to belong at a transnational university? Are you aware that it's transnational, and what does transnational mean? Do you have relationships with the other people in the other universities, and what is the nature of those relationships? Do you share the way that you think about knowledge? Do you think about the framing of that knowledge? Do you think about how that knowledge is applied in the different contexts? Do you spend time on each other's campuses? Do you know each other's languages? So again, I asked you to think about what belonging means to you. I want you to now have a moment and think about, what are the metaphors that you have? What are the images? If you think about belonging, what image comes to your mind? Do we belong together? Is it like a little nest? We belong in a little nest. Is it that we weave our knowledges together? Is it a weaving thing? So just think about some of the metaphors or images that you use that express belonging. So belonging is not something we give to students. It's something that we build with them. Psychologically, belonging enables meaning making, allowing students and academics to feel part of something larger than themselves. It's about how we define ourselves in relation to our groups, to our family, to our culture, to our profession, to our discipline, to our nation. Who do we resonate with, and what does that resonance mean? And belonging is very deeply tied to the affective domain, especially to shared values, our sense of purpose, and our worldview. It affirms our social validation and worthiness, so that we are seen and feel seen, heard, and valued. When in Australia, the Indigenous people, for example, were forbidden when the English came here and colonised this country. The Indigenous people were forbidden to speak their language and practice any cultural practices. When the first wave of non-English, non-British migrants came to this country, we were also disencouraged from speaking language. I remember my father really struggling when an English person, heard him speaking to someone. He would get, "You're in Australia now, speak English." And so all of that cultural memory and that knowledge that's held in culture was slowly eroded. So it's really important that students, wherever they come from, so true belonging is not passive. To belong is to participate in meaning making and not just occupy a seat in the classroom. So here are some different layers of belonging, and some of the challenges, and then the invitation. How do you make students belong to your classroom? So how do students feel that they're connected to each other, they're connected to you, and they are connected to the material that you're teaching? How do you feel when you are teaching online and all you see are black boxes and there's no humans that you can look at? Who are you speaking to? So it's really important to create room for relationship and relational learning and reflection. Another layer of belonging is our discipline. And how can we honour other ways of knowing, not just Indigenous, embodied and ecological, but also if you think about problems, one of the things that's very powerful in the classrooms that I create is that students come from many different disciplines to work together on a project. And so they bring different disciplinary perspectives to solving a problem. And that's certainly something that we'll be needing in the future. How do you belong in a university? What does it mean to have transnational expansion? Is Heriot-Watt in Malaysia the same as Heriot-Watt in Scotland? And if not, why not? Culture. Do we assimilate, or is there an air of reciprocity? Do we cultivate radical hospitality and deep listening so that we engage whoever is in that classroom and their cultural worldview? And one of the things I think that's increasingly important for students, and I think a lot of young people are really struggling with in today's world, is this crisis of meaning and disconnection. So even though people are bombarded with all sorts of information and tidbits, they don't feel connected either to each other or to the world that they're living in. And something that I often think about is how are we preparing students to deal with the global challenges ahead? So how do we get them to feel that they belong to the earth, to their community, and to time? So there are a number of different cultural aspects of belonging. Difference, for example, between rationality and individuality, belonging to place, aspects of learning, time, memory, and continuity as belonging is experienced across generations, ritual, ceremony, initiation, power, exclusion, and whoever controls the narrative of the country. I've elaborated this in the next slide. Yeah, so this is just, and I'm looking here at Indigenous or a relational lens. So Thailand was a very relational and collectivist culture. They tended to relationship before they tended to task, for example. So in the West, and the West, by the West I mean English, Northern European, autonomy and identity is important, whereas in relational cultures, relationship, connection to country, kinship, and responsibility and accountability are important. In the Western, or in people with an individualistic lens, tend to be looking forward, whereas people in a relational culture tend to honour intergenerational, cyclical, and ancestral knowledge. A sense of place is in the West very contextual or mobile, whereas in an Indigenous, it is more embodied and sacred. Ritual and formality is minimal or performative in the West, whereas again in the relational cultures, it's very spiritually significant, embodied, and central. Story and memory in an individualistic lens there's a personal narrative. I becomes important and it's internalized, whereas in a relational lens, it's collective, oral, place-based, and we. And the language of belonging in a Western culture is about fitting in and being accepted, whereas in an Indigenous culture, it's more about being part of and being held in kinship or relationship with everybody else that's there. Belonging is deeply tied to the affective domain. And I'm going to mention shortly both the affective and the cognitive domain. I'm sure you've all heard of Bloom's taxonomy, which is used now everywhere from higher education to kindergarten. And Bloom wrote Volume 1, the cognitive domain, together with a man called Crothwell, who wrote Volume 2 of that series, which was about the affective domain. And it's interesting to notice that while everybody uses Bloom's taxonomy, very few people understand how to relate at all to the affective domain. And one of the things is our values are developed very early in life, are often unconscious, and are taken as a given. So as we to engage in that discourse about our affective domain or our value system requires a lot of work and a lot of coming to consciousness and even challenging things that you held to be important. Psychologically, belonging enables meaning making when people can feel part of something bigger than themselves. When there's a misalignment between personal and group values, it can create cognitive dissonance, distress for students, or withdrawal. And Crothwell, as well as Mesereau, many others see Damasio, see affective taxonomy, values and affective domain as central to deep learning. It's not just how much we remember, because our memory begins, to give you a little bit of brain chemistry, when we're born, we have all the neurons that we will have for our whole life. We don't grow new neurons. But what starts to develop as we start to engage with the world is the neural pathways start to develop. And our early neural pathways all go through the limbic system, and the limbic system is connected to emotion. Before it comes into the front of our brain or our neocortex, which is about how we make sense of stuff. So any deep learning is impacted by our emotions and hence our values. And what I'd like to do now is I want us to take some of this stuff and to share, to think about belonging and your situation. So next slide, please. Using a reflective practice framework that I developed some years ago, which takes into account the affective domain, which is about meaning making, our cognitive domain, which is about sense making, and our cognitive domain, which is around our intentions. So I want you to think about a moment for you where there's some aspect of being part of a transnational university. There's some aspect of creating belonging and a feeling of connection, whether it be to the content you're delivering, whether it be to the students, whether it be to relationship to the other universities. Take a moment that was personally meaningful for you. And you know it's personally meaningful because feelings arise. So just write down on a bit of paper, just reflect on that moment and just write down, how did that moment make you feel? And think about also, what did you bring to that learning moment? Your experience, your culture, your epistemology, what you know, your disciplinary framework, your ontology or the way you be with the world, or your axiology, or something else maybe that influenced how you experienced that moment. And the feelings can be positive. It might be something where you said, oh, I had this fantastic connection with Anne in Scotland. Oh, that was wonderful. It made me feel connected and it made me feel expansive. Or it could be, I was trying to teach some material and I can't see its connections. The students are disconnected, made me feel frustrated, disconnected. So think about those feelings. Now, our feelings are very deeply connected with our values. And our values are about what is important to you. That's the reason you have a feeling response. So if I'm thinking, oh, I had a wonderful Zoom call with Anne and I'm feeling really good, it's because that connection and feeling seen and seeing the other are values that I hold dear. If it's a moment where I feel I presented this material and everyone was looking at their phone and no one was wanting to talk to me afterwards, people seemed to be interested, made me feel sad, disconnected, made me feel like I wanted to withdraw because, and what it touched there was what is important to me is feeling that what I have to share, others will want to share with me and want to connect with me. And when that's not happening, I feel sad. So the value is about connection, for example. So in this case, think about what is it about that learning moment that you jotted down that was important to you? What do you care about? And what's shaped your values? What values did you bring and what values did you meet in that learning moment? What kind of world does that knowledge help to create? And Crothwell sees values not as emotional preferences, but as structured commitments to what it is that we're doing. And when I teach my students how to do this, I get them to engage in this affective domain through writing down their feelings and their values. And then I ask them to go and do something else because the brain can't engage with the affective domain and the cognitive domain at the same time. So then I ask them to come back. But this is about when you're thinking about knowledge and how you make sense of knowledge, I invite students to go and find a resource that expands their way of knowing things. But a question for you to ask yourself is, whose knowledge is centered and in students making sense of it, and whose knowledge is silenced? And are students learning more than information? Because knowledge is not information, but we often feed them a lot of information. They're overwhelmed with information. Are they learning how to live well in the world? And are your students being prepared to contribute both locally and to address the global challenges ahead? The next phase is for then students to start thinking about their intention, because once they have their intention in an action plan, that will help them move to the next learning moment, which is where they can now focus their attention to make their learning more conscious. And you can feel free after this seminar to email me, and I'm happy to talk to you about this in more depth. And thinking about some of this, the reflective learning spiral and the different elements of it, what are the implications for belonging? And here I've gone from the learning moment, which signals that first spark of curiosity in a student, because that spark, they're taking the first step to belong in that moment, to their feelings, which is an emotional connection, belonging starts to stir through an emotional connection. And then the learner starts to identify what matters and what's important. The learner starts to weave new insights into their existing knowledge. And then the learning becomes lived learning, where belonging and identity can come together. In reframing global knowledge, local learning, how do we move from universal knowledge to pluriversality, where we honour many ways of knowing, not just Western epistemology? How do we move from neutral application to situated responsibility, where knowledge is applied in local contexts and with local communities? How do we move from analysis in abstraction, which is science is famous for, to some critical consciousness, where we unpack socio-political context and the power embedded in knowledge systems? And how do we move from creating alone to co-creation in relationship, where knowledge is a relational act, not just an individual output? And the world does not need more uniformity. We don't need cookie cutter universities all over the world where they're the same. It needs more connection. Thank you.